I have learnt before in the past not to follow Anne, and clearly I should listen more often to these things. A lot of what I'm going to say is going to be following on from what Anne has said. And when Anne very kindly invited me to come and share some thoughts with you this morning, I thought, oh my goodness, I've spoken to many of you, and I can see many of you who I know on these themes before. Have I got anything new to say? Unless I be equally dismissive of the fact that being retreading reality is part of what creativity is, I'm going to start by where Anne finished, which is that today in Scotland we will probably see elected a new First Minister. And at some stage in the next few weeks and months, I hope we will see the bill brought forward to create Scotland's Human Rights Bill and Act. And many of us, as Anne articulated, hope to see within that the ground from which the soil of creativity has to come, which is that everyone, regardless of circumstance, age, has a human right to be able to be creative, to have opportunity, to be given resource, and to enable accessibility to that creativity. Anything short of that will be a failure to properly incorporate the European and the International Convention on Cultural Social Rights. So everything I'm going to say is grounded in that reality, but I thought I would take as just to check they're coming up, thoughts, the invitation that we all received, because apparently today we have to engage in connection, there's to be inspiration and reflection. And actually, I think those three things properly describe the role of creative arts and ageing in themselves. And so I've decided to base some very brief reflections. Connection is interesting as a concept in creative ageing, especially for the solitaries amongst us in the room. Now, I fully accept that, in the words of the poet, no man is an island, we are all part of the main. But you know, sometimes I just quite like to be away from people. And I wonder if in our creative, artistic work in ageing, if we allow people to find that corner of the room that encloses them in the security of encounter on their own terms. I was chatting to somebody who was contemplating going into a care home a couple of weeks ago, and what was putting him off was the thought that he would be with people 24/7, that there would be lots of groups and forced camaraderie, and that he wouldn't be allowed simply to be, because part of being sometimes is being private and alone and detached and distant. Now, I think that is a stereotypical fear, but like all stereotypes, they're often grounded in some degree of truth and reality. The creative arts, whether they are used in a care facility or in a community setting, in one's own home or in your local, do indeed have the potential to connect people up, to meet loneliness and break down isolation, but they also have the capacity to offer privacy, to help you discover your own individuality and to become stronger in your sense of self and identity, maybe for the first time in your life. In truth, the arts are for both the islanders and the mainlanders. When I think of connection, the image that comes most to mind is Avril Payton's painting Windows in the West. Now, I hesitate to introduce this into perhaps an Edinburgh audience, but that's a Glasgow tenement. And as somebody who was brought up for many years in a tenement in Glasgow, I absolutely have always been convinced that Avril Payton's work, both that one, which is the more famous one, and this one, which I really like because a tenement comes alive at night, depicts brilliantly the uncoordinated, accidental connection, which is the mess of living in a tenement. Now, I could spend all morning talking and telling you about the stories behind each window. The children fighting, the lovers yearning, the couples settled into slippered age, the partners redesigning avoidance. But for me, this painting represents a deeper truth about connection, a deeper insight into what it means to live in community, often in shared community. The truth is that people who come together under the canopy created by the creative arts are able to be empowered to be themselves, to live their lives anew and afresh, to choose to be in connection or to decide to be detached. But the arts always change the individual. They have the ability to affirm individual identity and to create connected community. Connection, of course, cannot be forced. You just have to create the moments for happenstance. Creative arts, and you who are artists of creativity, are the hospitality makers of place and space that enable connection, that give people the strength to be on their own and the courage to face the living and the loving of the moment and the future. So today, as we connect to one another, can we also think about how we use our work to allow others to connect and to be detached? Are we creating enough emptiness for connection to happen, or are we predictable in the design of the moment? Have we created enough silence for language to be heard, or have we suffocated the echoes of personal story by our intrusive commentary? Do we create the space and the place for being in community, and especially those places and spaces we need for the hard times and the challenging thoughts and the emotional emptiness? Inspiration is the second expectation and hope of our being together today. For those of us in the room, the connotation with age and inspiration will be nothing new. Anne has already referred to us. We know that the art of imagining and the power of the imagination and the power it has to restore, to renew, to reinvigorate, to bring alive, does not have a use-by date. We've witnessed people in late age discovering for the first time the power and the joy and the life that comes from imagining different and discovering afresh. We've seen the moments of pure joy when someone discovers inside themselves the words that they have never been able to articulate, when someone paints an image that has struggled within them to be expressed, when in movement they take form of expression which tells a new story. We know that just as it is important to ask older people, what do they want of the future? So we need to make sure that we are nurturing the imaginative dimension of human living well into older age. The creative arts at their best are the midwives of an imaginative birthing that brings new possibilities, unimagined dreams, and unheard of possibility. Even in the latter days of breath, days that I have spent with many people, there is still a desire and a yearning to be someone, to be for someone, to do something new, to say something, to remember, to discover, to experience, until the last breath of living and loving. The power of imagining the places beyond the known and the realities beyond the possible do not decline as we age. They are just take on a different form. Anne has already challenged us that with the question as to whether or not we are in danger of making our art fit into a clinical science, to perversely limit the boundaries of creativity by being too focused on outcome and on discernible benefit, by using the metrics of identifiable and quantifiable science instead of the dynamic of enjoyment and experience and intuition and instinct and encounter and simple expression. I've always and continue to believe that there is massive, primary, non-therapeutic value in the arts. And it is dangerous reductionism to limit the creative arts to that output which we can discern. They are valuable in their own right, not as something that improves you or even as something that changes you. And I know that's a fine balance. But when I listened to Mozart in my 20s, Springsteen in my 30s, Natalie Merchant in my 40s, and Taylor Swift in my 50s, my primary motivation was enjoyment, not to get a sense of therapeutic value as a result. And I wonder if maybe there is one specific area where we have risked reductionism in expressive arts more than anywhere else, and indeed increasingly where we only fund the expressive arts if we can show neurological benefit, and that's dementia. A diagnosis of dementia, as most of us in this room will know, is not the full stop on the grammar of creativity, it's a new paragraph. But we have to be dangerous of presumptive acknowledgement that with dementia, there is only value in the arts if it can show benefit. I think we have to continue to be shocked and surprised, to be pulled away from predictable expectation and onto a new journey with the person who is living with dementia and whose territories of the mind and landscapes of their heart are changed by that disease. Life with dementia is not about maintenance. It's about living life to the full until the end, and the creative arts and your contribution in that space is not about maintenance. It's not about clinical benefit. It's about the maturity of living to the end. I feel an increasing sense that, especially in the way in which we support people with advanced dementia, that we spend too much of our focus on the country of yesteryear, that we give too much focus on memory and remembrance. Now, I'm not for 1 minute denying the clear neurological benefit of using the arts to enable an individual to express their memory, to remember moments, to reconnect. But there is equal untapped neurological benefit, societal benefit, personal benefit in using art forms to enable reimagination and new discovery, to help an individual discover passions and joys, interests and insights which they have never hitherto experienced. Art and dementia is as much about helping an individual paint and create the future as it is to remember the past. The last of the three themes which I've chosen today is very closely related to that, and that's on reflection. Now, the way we reflect in older age is palpably different from the reflective moments of our youthfulness. The pace slows and changes. The rhythm finds a new beat and a novel movement. But what a glorious richness there is in older age. A lifetime of raw clay, the clay of encounter and experience, able to be molded into a new creation in the present moment. If we hold that moment not just full of the past, but pregnant with possibility for the future. We need to give people the opportunity to find their own expressiveness and to discover the language that may have lain dormant within their hearts so that they can begin a new conversation, enter into a new dynamic of relationship with new people. And the arts are uniquely capable of doing that. I think at times we are fearful of leaving people who are older to sit and reflect because they'll get in touch with too much pain and that memory will grip them too hard. But there is nothing to be truly feared about the quietude of older age. There is no coldness in the absence of activism. For so many, it is the space and the place where we can sit and be, where we can connect the separate moments of our experience with the web of the future which pulls us into its creation. So active creativity has a unique place, I think, in the aging of our society. In active, passive, accepting, challenging age and all presumptions that come with it. But we're not talking about waiting until the tick-tock of finality comes amongst us. We're not passive recipients. We're active agents in creating the future of older age. I believe for all ages, the creative arts are a call to purposefulness and to decisiveness. One of my favourite poets is Mary Oliver, and one of my many favourite poems amongst her many poems is The Summer Day, which she wrote in 2020. And it imagines the world from the perspective of the grasshopper. And it finishes with these words, which are quite well known. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Now, you quite possibly know the last couple of lines. But for me, the power of this poem comes a bit earlier, and it is the word and the invitation. Tell me, what else should I have done? What else, the poet says, but falling down in the grass, being idle and blessed, strolling through the fields all day? That's a provocative question. It's maybe especially provocative for those of us who work in and with and around older age. What is a purposeful, productive day at any age? Is it not the contradictory, wild impressiveness of the idle industry of the grasshopper? Is it not the creativity of the self for the single encounter which energizes the moment? Is it not the ability to be surprised, to be shocked, to bind ourselves in belonging to one another? And is it not to be heard in the silence of true reflection? Oliver says everything dies, and she reminds us too soon. And having come out of a pandemic that took too many too soon, the creative arts have much to say and a huge amount to contribute to healing. But at their best, I believe, the creative arts encourage us to live intentional, not accidental lives, to be directors of our own play rather than actors for somebody else's script, to mould the clay of our being, shaped as it is by the story inside us, into an image of future possibility, to pen the language of our yearning and to dance the steps of a choreography not placed in sight. What do you plan to do with your one wild, precious life? That's a question for all ages. Keep adventuring, for you do not know just how much change and contentment, joy and exhilaration, challenge and new possibility you bring. And I hope with you that today will indeed connect, inspire, and enable us to reflect. Thank you.